The air in the Augusta, Georgia, courtroom was thick with anticipation. It was a humid Tuesday in July, and the room, though modest in size, held a weight that seemed to press against the walls. Captain Isaiah Carter, U.S. Army, retired, stood at the entrance, his dress uniform pristine, every crease sharp enough to cut through the tension. The Congressional Medal of Honor hung modestly over his heart, its blue ribbon and gold star catching the faint light filtering through the courthouse windows. Isaiah wasn't here for himself. He'd driven 6 hours from his home in Savannah to testify as a character witness for a former squad mate, Marcus Tate, caught in a messy property dispute with a local contractor. Isaiah, a former tomb guard at Arlington National Cemetery, carried himself with the quiet precision of someone who'd spent years perfecting every step, every salute. His service in Afghanistan, leading his unit through a brutal ambush in Kandahar, saving 8 soldiers and a group of civilians, had earned him the nation's highest honor. But to him, the medal was less about glory and more about the weight of those he couldn't save. He wore it today not for pride, but for Marcus, to lend credibility to a friend who'd always had his back. As Isaiah approached the witness stand, the room stilled. The bailiff, a wiry man with a nervous cough, announced, "Captain Isaiah Carter, U.S. Army, retired." Isaiah's boots echoed softly on the hardwood floor, each step measured, deliberate. He raised his right hand to take the oath, but before the clerk could begin, Judge Evelyn Harper, a woman with a reputation for no-nonsense rulings, raised a hand. "Hold on," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Captain Carter, I'm going to need you to remove that medal from your uniform." The room froze. The attorneys exchanged glances. A murmur rippled through the sparse gallery, mostly locals, a few reporters, and Marcus's family. Isaiah's hand paused mid-air, his face betraying no emotion, though his dark eyes flickered with surprise. "Ma'am," he said, his voice steady but questioning. "The medal," Judge Harper repeated, her tone clipped. "This is a courtroom, not a parade ground. We maintain neutrality here. That decoration could sway perceptions unfairly." Isaiah's attorney, a young public defender named Clarence Gwynn, leaned forward. "Your Honor, with respect, the Medal of Honor is part of Captain Carter's formal uniform, earned through extraordinary service. It's not meant to influence." "I'm aware of what it is," Harper interrupted, her eyes narrowing. "But this is my courtroom, and I decide what's appropriate. Remove it, Captain, or you won't testify." The silence that followed was suffocating. Isaiah's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Slowly, deliberately, he unclipped the medal, holding it in his palm as if it were a fragile relic. He placed it in his pocket, not on the table, not for display, just out of sight, as ordered. The act felt like stripping away a piece of his soul, but he complied. He gave his testimony, calm, factual, unwavering, about Marcus's integrity, his service, his character. When he finished, he stepped down, nodded to Marcus, and left the courtroom without a word. Outside, the summer heat hit him like a wave, but it was the weight of that moment that lingered. A local blogger, snapping photos for a small online outlet, caught Isaiah's expression as he exited, stoic but heavy. By evening, the blogger's post, with a grainy video of the exchange, was uploaded to X. The caption read, "Judge orders Medal of Honor hero to remove medal in court. Is this respect?" Within hours, it had thousands of views, shared by veterans groups, commentators, and strangers who felt the sting of the moment without fully understanding why. Isaiah drove home that night, the medal still in his pocket. He didn't check his phone, didn't read the growing storm of comments online. At his small apartment in Savannah, he sat on the edge of his couch, staring at the medal now resting on the coffee table. His German shepherd, Valor, lay at his feet, sensing the shift in his owner's mood. Isaiah's mother, Ruth, called from her home in Macon. "You okay, son?" she asked, her voice warm but probing. "They made me take it off, Mama," he said quietly. "Said it wasn't neutral." Ruth paused, her breath audible through the phone. "You carried that medal through fire and blood. Ain't nobody got the right to make you hide it. You hear me?" Isaiah didn't respond, but her words settled into him like a seed. He didn't know it yet, but that moment in the courtroom wasn't just a slight, it was the spark that would unravel everything. Back in Savannah, Isaiah tried to return to his routine. He worked part-time at a community center, mentoring at-risk youth and teaching them discipline through boxing. The kids called him Cap, not because they knew his rank, but because he carried himself like someone who led by example. To them, he was just the guy who always showed up, who listened, who taught them how to throw a punch and mean it without anger. But the courtroom incident followed him like a shadow. The video had gone viral, nearing 1 million views by the end of the week. Veterans organizations posted statements condemning Judge Harper's actions. Online forums buzzed with outrage, some calling it disrespect to a hero, others hinting at deeper biases. A few locals recognized Isaiah at the grocery store, offering quiet nods or handshakes. "Thank you for your service," they'd say, their voices tinged with something new, pity, maybe, or anger on his behalf. Isaiah hated it. He didn't want to be a symbol, a cause, or a victim. At the community center, one of his kids, 15-year-old Jamal, saw the video and brought it up during a sparring session. "Cap, why'd you let her do that? Tell you to take off your medal like it's nothing?" Jamal's fists were up, but his eyes were searching. Isaiah lowered his gloves. "Sometimes, you pick your battles, Jamal. That wasn't the hill to die on. But it's the medal," Jamal pressed. "Ain't nobody supposed to mess with that." Isaiah gave a small smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It's not about the medal. It's about what it stands for. And I don't need to wear it to know what I did." That night, Isaiah met his old friend, Lena Brooks, at a diner near the riverfront. Lena, a former army medic who'd served with him in Afghanistan, had a no-nonsense way of cutting through his defenses. Over burgers and sweet tea, she didn't mince words. "You're too quiet about this, Isaiah. That judge didn't just disrespect you, she disrespected every one of us who wore the uniform." "It's done, Lena," he said, pushing a fry around his plate. "I testified, Marcus got his day in court. That's what matters." Lena leaned forward, her braids brushing the table. "You think that's where it ends? You're a black man who earned the Medal of Honor, one of the few. You walked into her courtroom, and she saw you as a threat, not a hero. That's not about neutrality, it's about control." Isaiah didn't argue, but her words hit hard. He thought about his time as a tomb guard, the grueling training, the unspoken pride of being one of the few black soldiers chosen for the honor. He thought about Afghanistan, the chaos of that ambush, the screams, the weight of his brothers lives in his hands. And he thought about the judge's voice, sharp and unyielding, reducing his sacrifice to excessive insignia. The next morning, a letter arrived at his apartment, no return address. Inside was a handwritten note from a woman in Atlanta: "My son served in Iraq. He came home in a box, and they gave him a flag. I saw what that judge did to you, and it broke my heart. You're not alone." Enclosed was a small, folded American flag. Isaiah set it on his mantle, next to a photo of his unit. By the end of the week, more letters arrived, some from veterans, others from strangers, one from a 10-year-old girl who'd drawn a picture of a soldier with a gold star. Isaiah didn't respond to the letters, not yet. But he couldn't ignore the growing noise. A local reporter, Amara Ellis, reached out for an interview. She was young, sharp, and persistent, working for a small Savannah paper. Isaiah declined, but Amara didn't give up. She published a piece titled "A Hero Silenced: What Judge Harper's Ruling Says About Respect." It was careful, factual, citing court records and quoting veterans' advocates. It also mentioned other cases under Harper, moments where minority veterans or officers seemed to face harsher scrutiny in her courtroom. Amara's article caught the attention of a national veterans organization, which reached out to Isaiah. They wanted him to speak at a rally, to turn his experience into a call for change. Isaiah wasn't ready. He didn't want to be a figurehead, didn't want his life reduced to a viral moment. But Lena's words, Jamal's questions, and the letters piling up on his kitchen table were starting to shift something inside him. Amara Ellis wasn't one to let a story die. At 29, she'd built a reputation for digging into truths others overlooked. After her initial article, she started researching Judge Harper's record. She found a pattern, not blatant, but consistent. In cases involving minority veterans or law enforcement officers, Harper's rulings often included phrases like potential bias or unnecessary displays of authority. A black police officer had been asked to remove his badge in court. A Latino Marine's testimony was dismissed as emotionally charged. Amara cross-referenced court transcripts, spoke to retired clerks, and quietly built a case. She reached out to Isaiah again, this time in person, catching him after a session at the community center. "I'm not here to push you," she said, her voice earnest. "But people are listening now. Your story, it's bigger than you." Isaiah wiped sweat from his brow, his boxing gloves slung over his shoulder. "I'm not a story, Amara. I'm just a man trying to live." "You're more than that," she said. "You're a symbol of something people need to see. Not just what happened in that courtroom, but what it means." Isaiah didn't commit, but he took her card. That night, he opened his laptop and read her latest article. It wasn't just about him anymore, it was about a system that seemed to undervalue the service of certain people. He thought about the letters, the flag, the drawing from the little girl. He thought about his mother's words, "Ain't nobody got the right to make you hide it." The next day, he called Amara. "I'll talk," he said. "But not for me. For the others." The interview was quiet, held at the diner where he and Lena often met. Isaiah spoke carefully, not about anger or outrage, but about duty, how it felt to carry the medal, how it felt to be told to remove it. He talked about the kids he mentored, the soldiers he'd lost, the weight of being seen as too much in a room meant for justice. The article, published a week later, was titled "A Hero's Voice, Captain Isaiah Carter Speaks Out." It didn't accuse, it simply let Isaiah's words stand. The response was overwhelming. Veterans groups organized protests outside the Augusta courthouse. Social media campaigns demanded accountability. A petition for a formal review of Judge Harper's conduct gained thousands of signatures. Isaiah didn't join the protests, but he watched from afar, uneasy with the attention but unable to look away. Then came the bombshell. Amara's research uncovered a memo from Harper's early years as a judge, where she'd argued against military decorations in court, citing potential juror bias. The memo wasn't explicitly discriminatory, but it was written in a way that gave her broad discretion to control courtroom appearances. A retired clerk, speaking anonymously, told Amara that Harper had once remarked that certain uniforms carried too much emotional weight for a neutral setting. The pressure mounted. The Georgia Judicial Qualifications Commission announced a review of Harper's conduct. She issued a statement, claiming her ruling was about maintaining impartiality, not disrespecting service. But the public wasn't buying it. Isaiah's story had become a lightning rod, exposing not just one moment, but a deeper unease about how heroes are treated when their presence challenges the status quo. Isaiah's life changed in ways he hadn't expected. The community center where he worked saw an influx of donations, enough to expand the boxing program and add a mentorship track for young veterans. He started speaking at local schools, not about the courtroom, but about resilience, about carrying weight without letting it break you. The kids listened, especially Jamal, who began training harder, dreaming of a future in the military. The letters kept coming, now addressed to Captain Carter or simply the hero. Isaiah read every one, though he still struggled to respond. One stood out, a note from a Vietnam veteran who'd faced similar slights decades ago. "You stood tall when they tried to make you small," the veteran wrote. "That's what makes you a hero, not the medal." Isaiah kept that letter on his fridge, a reminder of why he'd finally spoken out. Judge Harper's career unraveled. The Judicial Qualifications Commission found no explicit misconduct, but the public scrutiny was relentless. She announced her retirement 6 months later, citing personal reasons. Amara's reporting earned her a national award, but she deflected the praise, saying the real story was Isaiah's courage to speak. Isaiah never wore the medal again in public, not out of shame, but because he didn't need to. It lived in a small wooden box on his mantle, next to the folded flag and the girl's drawing. He and Lena started a non-profit, Valor's Voice, to support minority veterans navigating civilian life. Marcus's case was settled in his favor, and he credited Isaiah's testimony for tipping the scales. One evening, as Isaiah walked Valor along the Savannah River, a young woman approached him. She was a college student, inspired by his story to study law. "I want to be a judge one day," she said. "A fair one." Isaiah smiled, the first real smile in months. "Then be the kind of judge who sees people for what they've done, not what makes you uncomfortable." As she walked away, Isaiah looked out at the water, the metal's weight still in his pocket, though he hadn't carried it in weeks. The courtroom had tried to erase him, but it had done the opposite, it had given him a voice. And that voice, quiet but steady, would echo far beyond Augusta, inspiring others to stand tall, no matter who told them to shrink.